think we can start. So thank you all for coming at this ungodly hour. And it's been a while since I did my last talk, and I'm very flattered to open up this track. And also, this is my first talk in English, so no pressure there. And I'm hopeful that you're gonna get something out of this. But we're here to talk some stuff about productivity. So first things first, a little bit about me. So my name is Karol Sójko. I'm a digital nomad, which basically means I get out as much as I can. Otherwise, I would get crazy working remotely from my home. Other than that, I'm a full stack developer and developer unleasher at X team. So what does that mean? That means that I take care after 16 developers currently, and I'm working on their productivity, helping them grow professionally and achieve their goals. And also, full stack developer, you all know what it means, but that combined with working remotely means that I should probably know a bit or two about productivity. In 2015, I wrote this book, which is a book about productivity in the context of teams. And from that point, I started working professionally on productivity with teams and individuals. First, I started in teams, and then in 2016, I joined X team, which basically comes down to me working with those handsome fellas and working on improving their productivity as individuals. So this talk is about 9 productivity techniques that I'm going to share with you. I'm going to give you 7 tips that I've developed and try to debunk 6 myths that I've encountered during my almost 2 years journey into improving productivity. So you might ask, isn't like 9 techniques a lot on one talk? I'm glad you asked. Yes, it is. So I'm not gonna dwell into so much details on every one of those techniques. Rather, I'm gonna give you an overview of stuff that you're gonna probably take from here and experiment yourself. So that's the point of it. And for those of you that are OCD in the room, the reason that there's no number 8 on this slide is that I wanted to fit in 8 jokes there, but I was thinking that it's gonna be pushing too much since this is my first English talk. So, without further ado, number 1 productivity technique is GTD, which stands for getting things done. How many of you started with this one? Okay, quite a few. So GTD is basically a mind framework that you approach stuff that comes through your hands or through your mind with this sort of workflow where you decide whether something is actionable or needs to be put down into a list or a calendar or delegated or stuff like that. Then you group those stuff into projects or label them and try to figure out stuff for your own. So during that technique, I've started my journey, and like most of the people, I was fascinated by the amount of to-do apps that are out there and was trying each and every one of them. And I thought that always the next one was going to make me more productive. But I figured out at some point that there's a myth connected with productivity that, especially when it comes to apps, they tend to compete with each other, saying that this or that app will make you more productive, or this app or that is more productive, which is a thing that you at some point realize that it's not necessarily true, because it's not a matter of an app being more productive. It's a matter if it fits more your workflow or if it's more sort of tailored for you. So when an app fits your workflow more, it doesn't mean that it's gonna fit everyone else's. So this is about more than this app being better than the other. It's more about figuring out which one is the best for you. And another myth that I've encountered during like the first stages of my productivity journey was the medical inbox zero. So this is something that is often sought after, but it's good when you have an inbox zero in your email inbox, but it's not necessarily good when you have an inbox zero status in your productivity app, because that means either you're too lazy to put something in or you're too bored at this moment. So inbox zero is not something that you need to chase when it comes to productivity. It's even better to have more stuff on your list that you can figure out or decompose later. And at some point I figured out that having like to-do lists or everything in an app in a list is not necessarily that sexy because I had like a hectic schedule and I didn't know what to do when, and things didn't always make sense. So I've started experimenting, because when you read a lot of like research and blog posts about GTD, there's going to be like a blog post that it's going to say that you're doing everything wrong, and then you're going to read another blog post about GTD, and someone's going to say that guy and you are doing everything wrong, and then another post, and so on and so on. So at some point you're going to figure out what's wrong with those guys. So at that stage I figured out it's time to experiment on my own, since everybody's sort of like this guru of productivity when it comes to GTD. And having a hectic schedule, I've started experimenting with time boxing. And time boxing basically means that you work a lot with your calendar. So how many of you like consider your calendar as one of your top productivity tools? Okay, quite a few. So what this technique means is that you put everything into events or boxes and you plan for the whole week on your calendar. And I'm going to show you an example in a moment, but basically what I started is I've put everything down when it comes to whatever I do during the day, and it was like everything. Going to the gym, walking the dog, lunchtime, software development time, meetings, and so on and so on. So you have like a full schedule, and sort of way to do it is that you always consider a buffer for an activity. So you put half an hour more or 15 minutes more to have that buffer. When something goes wrong, then you have time to catch up with everything else during the day. So during that time when I was extensively working with my calendar, I figured out that busy doesn't always mean productive. Because on those days that I had a lot of events in my calendar, I wasn't necessarily productive. I was busy, but I didn't get a lot of things done. So at that stage, I figured out that I need to work this some more. And this is an example how my calendar looked like at some point. And as you can see, everything's neatly put down in colored boxes. So you've got time for software development, which is the blue one, and time for meetings, which is the slightly light blue one. And I figured out that like on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday was busy days for me. And I had a lot of meetings at that point. And I figured out that I need to develop something that I called No Meetings Wednesday, which is basically time for me to do software development at that point. And I figured out like at Wednesdays, I was the most productive of me that I could be. So during the whole week, I was waiting for another Wednesday, basically. And at that stage, when I was doing this for like 2 or 3 months in a row. And after that sort of period, I figured out that this is kind of a little bit overwhelming. So I'm going to butcher the name, but Antoine Saint-Exupéry tells something like perfection is not achieved when there's nothing more to add. Perfection is achieved when there's nothing less to take away. So having that in mind, I figured out that I was working like a robot during the whole day with those events. And at some stage, I figured out that I've stopped even looking at those calendar boxes because I've developed like routines and habits that didn't require me to check what's the next event for today. And having that calendar, I've started taking out to have less clutter and more space, because obviously I was waking up at that point at the same time and walking the dog at the same time, so there was no point in having that in my calendar. So I obviously knew when to walk my dog, and if I didn't know, he would probably remind me of that very quickly. Next thing was regular meal times. Obviously, I've developed some routines, so that went away as well. And at that stage, I thought that obviously I've created a habit for myself to start my day with reviewing my inbox and ending my day with planning the next one, another one away. And figured out that either way I'm going to do software development during the rest of my day, so no need to have a calendar option to it. And then I was left only with the meetings, which was kind of crucial. But at that stage, having to work remotely with other developers from all over the world, I've asked them if they want fixed schedule, like fixed meetings on a schedule, or do they want me to just ping them at whatever time? And most of them said that they prefer async meetings, so that went away. I removed all of it, and now I have my calendar clean. And you could ask that, what was this for? So I went back to having no calendar from having a full calendar, and the reason is that the most important thing is between the lines, because I've developed routines and habits for myself that I no longer need to track in my calendar. So I strongly encourage you to try this out for like a week or two, and then figure out if you need more time or if it works for you to have like this kind of schedule thing. Another technique that I've tried after that was called Pomodoro. How many of you know that one? Okay, so this is quite popular. So Pomodoro basically is a technique that helps you deeply focus on tasks. What you do in Pomodoro is you break down a task estimated in chunks of time that you're going to be super focused on it. So the default time is I think 15 minutes of work and 5 minutes break, or was it 25? So you can basically mingle with the time and adjust it however you want. But what's crucial is that you have a certain amount of time that you're deeply focused, not doing anything else, and then you have a break period. And that whole cycle is called one Pomodoro. And as many Pomodoros as you can do during a day is, I guess, the best. And at that stage, I figured out that everybody says that multitasking is key, and this is how we work basically most of the time. So we're doing software development, and we're checking emails, and we're doing code reviews, and answering Slack or whatever. But when it comes to Pomodoro, I figured out that when you have very sort of intense and focus demanding tasks, it's best to use that technique to get things done. And I figured out that Pomodoro is not necessarily the best technique to use on an everyday basis, because it's very exhausting. And it's good to know it when you have tasks that are big or require a lot of focus from you. For example, I did Pomodoros with this, doing the slides for this presentation. And I've tried it with other developers that I work with, and I had the same thing. Everybody like was starting Pomodoros, and after 3 or 4 days, they just said that they can't be like super intensively focused after 4 days. It's too exhausting, because you have to get to that multitasking period at some time to relax the mind. But if you have a highly demanding focus task, from time to time, it's very good to use this technique and to have a grip on it. So it's good to have that in your belt, but not necessarily on an everyday basis. And at some point when I joined the X team, I've encountered something that's called journaling. And what I observed there was that almost everyone had a journal in Slack. How many of you know Slack? Okay, so for those of you that don't know, Slack is a communication tool where you can chat with everyone. It has like public and private channels, a little bit like a sexy IRC back in the day. So what they did was that they had private channels that they invited everyone else to. And those private channels were their journals, where they wrote what they did and what they're gonna do today, and what are they struggling with. So basically, your ordinary Scrum daily meeting, but in a written form. And since this company doesn't have an office, and since we're all working remotely all over the world, so that's sort of crucial to have that channel to go through whenever it's convenient for you. And also what I've, just an example of how a journal entry looked like. So this was my, for example, my private journal channel, and I've wrote there that I've created this talk synopsis in my bio and just posted some notes about it, and I've got like 4 high fives for that from other people reading that. So that's kind of cool that you get that feedback from other people that who see what you're doing. And also what it serves is, when it comes to productivity, it serves a lot in terms of planning. So for example, I would start a week where they just posting some notes about what I'm gonna do and what I plan to do. And regarding that, a tip about that is I strongly encourage you to try out journaling in whatever form. It doesn't have to be Slack, but in a form that's transparent for your clients or transparent for your coworkers or your teammates. That way you can build trust, and that transparency is sort of crucial to for people to see where you're going. And I figured out that email doesn't work necessarily in that thing, because email requires immediate like reading or response from someone else. It's good. Slack is kind of good for that, because everybody can read it in their own time if they want to or not. And another thing that helped me at that initial journaling period was, I was thinking that journaling is kind of tedious, right? Because like I have to put in everything that I'm working on, and there's going to be a lot of more work on top of the work I'm doing already. And what helped me at that stage was automating a lot of things. So I'm a big fan of automating stuff at this point. Do anybody of you know services like If This Then That or Zapier? Okay. So basically, what I have set up at this stage is, like, for example, I use Evernote for quick notes, and whenever I save a quick note with some stuff that comes to my mind or some notes from a meeting, that goes immediately to my journal when everybody can read it. And when I tick off a task from my to-do list, that goes to my journal as well, so everybody sees what I'm working on. And that basically creates like a stream feed of my activity during the day, and that helps a lot to build that trust and being transparent in a company that's remote, but also in an office would work as well. And after that, working with 16 developers, I figured out that it's kind of hard to remember everyone's goals and what they want to achieve and how they want to grow. So I figured out that we need to put their goals and what they want to achieve into some mind maps. And what I did was I've sat down with each and every one of them, and for the first 10 minutes I've told them to dump everything from their mind that when it comes to professional growth that comes to their mind. So people were like writing, I don't know, like PHP, Docker, front-end, serverless, React, whatever, like dumping everything without considering or processing it. And then after that initial 10 minutes, they had like a long list, and I said, okay, let's put that into a mind map. We've put that into a mind map without any organizing and sorting, probably in around 10 minutes. And another 10 minutes, we were doing grouping and organizing. So here's a simple example. This helped me sort of visualize goals of my developers that I work with. So, for example, this is just a simple example. You could have a person that wants to do some open source stuff in BDD or PHP and wants to do some talks on conferences or meetups and wants to try out some DevOps work with Docker maybe. And we've put everything there, and we started meeting weekly to sort of tick off the branches that they want to pursue now. So for example, in one week we could focus on creating a symphony bundle, and the other week someone said that I'm really tired with like coding, so let's try something new this week. And instead of like coming up with stuff, we had already this map where they want to grow, and it was visual, and we could add things and we could tick things off that were completed. So that made them more productive in a bigger picture, because they weren't doing like day-to-day stuff, but they had a greater plan in mind, and not only in mind, but it was also visual. And when it comes to productivity, I think a good tip is to have an accountability buddy. So someone that you can, on a weekly basis, talk to and say that what you have done and what you're gonna do. So that has to be a person that's pretty honest with you and gonna say you that, hey, you're slacking off this week, so get to work. But it helps a lot to have that person when you have something bigger in mind. And another thing that we started with my fellow developer unleashers in X team was gamifying the whole productivity experience. So we figured out that when you have a community around productivity and everything that you do has sort of this acknowledgement and feedback, and also if you can see other people doing stuff, then you're going to be more motivated to do stuff and be more productive. So we figured out, we wrote a simple app where we put every developer's goals in it. Basically the same thing that we had in the mind map into like cards and achievements. And every time someone achieved something, we created a bot that posted that achievement on Slack. So whenever someone, like you can see in this example, someone created a CRUD REST API with serverless and DynamoDB. So everyone was high-fiving that. And we had like a whole channel for this, which was basically a stream of people's achievements and goals and accomplishments and a lot of high fives and a lot of motivation. So we got a lot of feedback from people saying that, you know what, I wasn't sort of like into doing stuff, but seeing every day people doing so great stuff and everybody's cheering for them like made me want to be more productive as well. And another thing that we did in terms of gamifying the experience was last year we started a tournament. So we divided every developer into, so we divided all our developers into 3 houses, which were the tournament houses. And every achievement was 10 points for the house. So kind of a Harry Potter thing. And every time someone achieved something, the bot would count the score and bump the score. So that made a huge sort of wave of productivity. Like people started working like crazy on their achievements. So gamifying the experience makes a lot of difference. And if you can, anyhow, try to spin your productivity into a game or make it fun, it's going to be the best thing for you. And the 7th productivity technique I want to talk about is Mark Twain once said that when you eat a frog as the first thing during the day, then nothing worse is going to happen to you during the whole day. So taking a spin on that, I figured out that it's good to start the day with maybe not the worst thing, like eating the frog, but the thing that you're most passionate about. So I've started the day with like reading blog posts that I'm currently into, or doing like a mobile app in React Native that I've really wanted to do for quite a while. And I've scheduled an hour every morning for this. So every day I started with having an hour for the stuff that I'm most passionate about and that I was willing to do the most. And the rest of the day was even more productive because I was already in that sort of passionate workflow. So eating the frog is a very good technique that you can already starting tomorrow, I guess. And what I encourage you to do, because at this stage I was doing like a lot of productivity techniques, and it's always good to experiment and not necessarily take every productivity technique as it is, but take the best thing out of it and create something for of your own. So whenever you see something that you're working on and like you have a perfect workflow with some technique, switch it to another one, but remember like what you liked the best in the first one and try to mix stuff from every one of them. And another myth was that a lot of people start the day with small tasks. So what I figured out at some point is that when you start the day with like small tasks in your from your to-do list, you lose the momentum. So I had like stuff that was big on my to-do list. For example, creating a serverless API that we needed, and also like the day-to-day stuff like fixing a bug, reading the blog post, reviewing code, pull request. So I figured out that I always start the day with those smaller stuff, and that when I'm finished with those, that bigger task is always like pushed away for tomorrow, because I was like already did a lot of things, and I was thinking that okay, that's gonna be for tomorrow because that's too big for me. So whenever you can, start the day with the tasks that is most demanding from you, because you're gonna, if you start small, you're gonna push it later for another day. And once I've developed, like I've built a lot of trust with my journal, as most of the ex-teamers did, I figured out that like I was writing like long essays of what I'm doing, and it was maybe a bit time consuming for other people to go through all of it. And I figured out that, okay, once I've built that trust and they can see that I'm doing a lot of things, then I can sort of minimalize it and put it in a condensed form. So I figured out that a good technique is to plan your day with a daily to-do list. And I've put everything in, like I started every day with putting everything into what I'm gonna do today, and then ending the day with a report what I did today. So as you can see on the screen, there's a list of tasks that I wanted to do today. And later today, I would end up with, for example, having 5 or 6 completed out of those 7. So that's kind of sets the tone for the day. You have to plan it in order to put that list. And that also says to all of your coworkers what are your intentions for today, what you're gonna do. And having that amount of work consumed on productivity porn, I figured out that when it comes to productivity techniques, it's the same when it comes to productivity apps. So whenever someone says that this technique will make you a better person and you're gonna have more time for yourself and for your goals and so on, that's not necessarily true, because you have to approach it with a mind of your own and experiment with a lot of those techniques, take the best out of them, and create a workflow that works for you best. And I was pretty tired at that point with experimenting with a lot of stuff, and it's always good to take a break. So I've took a break from productivity for 2 weeks. I didn't use any techniques, and man, it was chaotic. It was chaos. So you have to use productivity techniques to stay on top of your list and your stuff to do. But remember to always take a break to figure out what worked best for you, because in that chaos, when you don't use anything, you have that opportunity to look at everything at that chaos with a fresh mind and figure out what worked for you best and what maybe could work for you best in the future. So having that said, and experimenting a lot and picking out every single thing that worked the best from productivity, I was doing with the developers I worked with during the whole last year weekly meetings that we established goals on, and we were working with those mind maps that I showed you and gamifying the experience in Slack and so on. But I figured out that a lot of them were switching subjects from week to week. So in terms of a year, when we ended 2016, a lot of them had a lot of accomplishments in a lot of areas. But the people that were most admired and most high-fived were the people that stick to 1 or 2 topics. So I figured out that it's good to, like, having all those techniques that we're already using, it's good to establish a theme for the year for yourself. So I've asked all of them to take a weekly break from doing their achievements and goals and figure out what they want to, not what they want to do this year, but who they want to become. And so when there's December 2017, they look back at the year that they did and see who they have become with their accomplishments. So everybody was thinking about it during the whole week, and they came with a lot of different things, like, I want to be a conference speaker, I want to be an open source contributor, I want to be a mobile app creator, and so on and so on. So a lot of them picked a theme for the year for themselves, and every time we meet weekly now, they come up with goals for themselves, and we try to decompose them, having that theme for the year in their mind. So we developed that laser focus for that. And what helped a lot is that once they've established that theme for the year for themselves, we figured out that just like having an accountability body, it's good to make it public. So we've put that theme for the year in our goals app, where every other developer can see, okay, this guy wants to be a blogger, this guy wants to be an open source contributor, this guy wants to be a mobile app developer. So what this helped in was not only did they focus more on that theme for the year, but they had people saying, hey, if you want to get more into that, I can help you because you know a lot of stuff about that. So it's always good to make your goals and your achievements public, because you never know who can help you. And making that public makes you more accountable for what you aim for in the long term. So if you can take anything from this talk, I would like you to think of productivity that less is more. It's important to build trust with people you work with. Automate a lot of things so you have more time. Find an accountability buddy. Experiment a lot. Take the best out of it for yourself. Take a break once in a while. And make everything you do public and accountable. Thank you. If there are questions, I can take questions in Polish as well, so no problems.
Hi. I have a question about your calendar, because I did the same thing. I did many same things as you. And when I started to take out my routines, I noticed that I slacked off. Like, my routine stopped being my routine, and I had a problem with that. Is it like, I'm wondering if it really was a routine, or maybe I just, you know, without the calendar, I just were too lazy. And
so it's the question more about whether you consumed the right amount of time to develop that routine, or was it necessarily an important routine for you? Because maybe it wasn't.
Maybe not a question, but some recommendation. Last year I attended the Agile by Example conference, and I recommend you to see the presentation Stop Starting, Start Finishing, about the content switching, how it, let's say, reduces the productivity. And of course, one more comment on it. I also recommend you to take a slack time for yourself.
Thank you. Any more questions? So I've got books I've wrote, so if you have time, I got a book for a question, or if you have time to talk to me after this talk, I strongly encourage you. I've got like 3 left. So yeah. Oh, there's more questions. Who knew?
Thank you for the talk. So now there is a reward for the question. I have a question now. You said it, I really strongly feel that all the productivity techniques and methods, they are all kind of very subjective. Everything works, as you said, some techniques works for you, some techniques don't work for you but work for other people. and everybody is saying that this technique is the best because it works for me. So the question is, don't you think that some of the techniques, because you experiment with a lot of them and you use a lot of them in your work, all of these things listed on the slide, don't you think they kind of take your time, make you think about productivity, not about the actual work, making like the finishing things? And don't you think, for example, that sharing stuff and making it public, sharing the to-do lists and completed list, the achievements, everything of that, doesn't it takes your time and time of your developers to read for all of it and think about it instead of doing the actual work?
Okay, so if I remember correctly, so sharing publicly the stuff you want to do like today or like having that journal doesn't require other people. It's not sort of mandatory for them to read it. But if they want to stay on top, that's okay. That's the difference between email and having that sort of channel for it. Because if I would write an email to everyone, then they would be sort of compelled to open it in their email client and read it. But this way they can read it whenever they want or just skip it if they don't have time for that. So that's one thing. And the other thing was if it makes you less productive trying out all of that stuff. That's what I said, like taking a break in a while, once in a while is good, and not using like everything strictly as the method is described, but experimenting a lot and taking the best things out of every one of them to make something of your own. So you have to obviously use a lot of reason and mind to not focus a lot of the technique, but think about whether it makes you productive or not, or what are the things in that technique that make you productive or not. Okay.
Another question about GTD. As you manage the task per day, do you have any option for managing the to do something in to give an hour by time boxing to manage if you have any problem?
So yeah, when I was doing Pomodoro, I figured out that I've started with Pomodoro like doing tasks, a separate task that I had on my to-do list, but I figured out it's best to treat everything like software development time. So I don't sort of put 15 minutes of work on this task and 15 minutes of work on that task. I just treat it like as a block and work from top to down on that list, and not necessarily break it down into singular pieces. I don't know if I answered your question. So can you repeat it? Like.
Tu może powtórzę, żeby się zrozumieć. Według GTD mamy zadania planowane na dzień, a co z zadaniami, które muszą być wykonane do danej godziny? Czy to masz jakoś zarządzasz automatycznie aplikacją?
Znaczy myślę, że to jakby zdroworozsądkowo tutaj wszyscy podchodzimy do tego i raczej w GTD się nie planuje co do danej godziny. No co do danej godziny możesz sobie ustawić, że masz spotkanie albo coś w tym stylu, albo wysłać maila. Ale jakby zadania, które masz typowo deweloperskie, typu napisać jakiś feature albo tak dalej, raczej do danej godziny ciężko to wyestymować. Dlatego myślę, że lepiej to timeboxować na kalendarzu sobie, że masz wtedy czas na pracowanie nad tym zadaniem.
Też po polsku. Takie pytanko, jak sobie radzisz z takimi jakby powiedzmy przerwaniami, czyli powiedzmy masz jakiś plan na cały dzień i nagle ktoś ci dzwoni, jakiś telefon, mówi, nie wiem, zrób coś czy coś, albo ktoś ci coś pisze na Slacku. No i wiem, że takie przerwania pewnie mogą jakby cały dzień rozwalić w pewien sposób, bo masz coś przygotowane i nagle się okazuje, że robisz coś, co kto inny ci gdzieś tam podrzucił. To jest pytanie, czy to na przykład mówisz im, że nie wiem, sorry, ale nie mam czasu dla was, czy jakoś tym zarządzasz, planujesz? Jak to wygląda?
To znaczy zależy od dnia. W sensie, jeśli mam taki dzień, gdzie mam bardzo zadania wymagające skupienia i na przykład używam Pomodoro, żeby się na czymś skupić, no to oczywiście wyłączam notyfikacje wszystkie. Na telefonie mam wyłączone by default, nie pozwalam aplikacjom na notyfikacje. I po prostu skupiam się na danym zadaniu, telefonów mogę nie odebrać. Odbiorę dopiero jak skończę swoje zadanie. Ale jeśli mam taki dzień luźny, to generalnie multitasking. Jakieś jeszcze pytania?
So how does your company your company has a goal, and the goal is to deliver a good product, and for that certain people have to have certain knowledge, and some people might not align with their development and the knowledge that they need for the product to achieve. So maybe the company needs the employee to develop in this direction, but the employee doesn't like it and he wants to be a front-end developer when we need a back-end developer. How do you manage that?
So sort of, X-Team doesn't have that problem necessarily, because we hire developers to certain projects. So we're looking for a certain profile of person. So it's more, those things that I'm working with them on are more their personal growth. So for example, a front-end developer that's working for a client would like to try out some DevOps work. And that is something he's passionate about. It's not something that he requires to do the job, but that's something that he built interest in. So I hope that answers your question. Okay. Any more questions? Thank you once again.